centuries before the German occupation in 1940, Paris had been a magnet for those throughout the world who sought freedom and civilized living. In pre-war Paris, a leisurely pattern of life had been created over the years, in which the free exchange of ideas was marked by the endless conversations of the cafes. Artists of every nationality came to work and study in Paris under the acknowledged masters of the arts. Paris was a refuge for the oppressed, where no ideas were barred, no audience refused to anyone who had a cause to plead. Paris honored learning as have few other cities, and in Paris there was always time to think, time to reason. It was a center of liberal thought, where renowned writers met to exchange ideas and to discuss the rising threat of autocratic government, in which they saw an obvious peril to the free world. But Paris by night became a city devoted to pleasure. No one could be disappointed on that score. Entertainers who had won fame in Europe and in the Western Hemisphere graced Parisian nightlife and brought to it an atmosphere of cosmopolitan living which has never been duplicated elsewhere. Then in the early fall of 1939, after years of Nazi bloodless aggressions and a series of shocks in the war of nerves, Paris accepted the inevitability of war. And Paris set about preparing to the best of her ability for the coming conflict, confident that her army could stop the German ground forces, if not the Luftwaffe. When war came, Poland collapsed in 4 weeks. 8 months later, the Low Countries fell. Then came swift disaster to France. Once more, the streets of Paris echoed, as they had in 1871, to the tread of hobnailed German boots. And Paris, under the swastika, became a city of sorrow. To Paris came the architects of ruin in the persons of Hitler and Goering and their satellites. And in a city which had long been a symbol of freedom, a paranoid ex-paper hanger proclaimed freedom's end. Said Hitler, Europe is ours for 1,000 years. But in the New World, millions who were determined that France would live again found their reaction to her fall best expressed by President Roosevelt.
The whole of our sympathies lie with those nations that are giving their lifeblood in combat against those forces.
And the American people were quick to express their love of France by practical gifts as well as by moral support. Sobered by the plight of the French, America began training thousands of men who were later to take part in the liberation of France. American labor and management together turned their abilities to the production of goods for war. Within 4 years, warships were being produced at the rate of 573 a year. The output of guns and ammunition rocketed as the industrial plants of America swung into stride. Aircraft production rose to 9,000 planes a month. 57,000 tanks a year rolled off the line. Into these weapons of war went all the resources of the Western Hemisphere: rubber, tin, chrome, strategic materials from every North and South American nation. Across the Atlantic steamed huge British and American convoys, carrying the weapons and supplies of the New World to the British Isles, which stood so valiantly as the last outpost of democracy in Europe. At Quebec, Canada in 1943, Roosevelt and Churchill, acting on the advice of their military staffs, made the momentous decision to invade Europe. Three months later at Tehran, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill met, and the invasion date was set so that it would coincide with the Russian offensive. Thus, the utmost pressure would be brought to bear on Germany simultaneously on every front by Russian, American, and British forces. But the Germans had not been idle. They had constructed with slave labor a complex and massive series of fortifications along the coasts of Europe. Heavy gun emplacements, minefields, tank traps, and pillboxes formed a barrier beyond which it seemed no enemy could pass. Into the planning and building of these great fortifications went the best ability of the German General Staff, whose members repeatedly inspected the Atlantic Wall for possible weaknesses, and the German General Staff pronounced it impregnable. But in the spring of 1944, an Allied weapon the Germans had underestimated began to make its power felt with ever-increasing frequency. Allied bombers intensified the systematic destruction of German production facilities. Royal Air Force and U.S. Army planes flew side by side in the great bombing raids.
And it's about o'clock, Dick. I see them, I see them. Confirm that one, Mike. He's burning.
Gradually, the Allies won control of the air over Europe. By May of 1944, the stockpiles of U.S. and British supplies in England had reached a point which guaranteed that the Allied armies would lack for no piece of essential equipment. England had become one vast warehouse for the coming invasion. Then, early in June of 1944, at headquarters in England, the High Command met. In command of all Allied ground forces was General Sir Bernard Montgomery. The time had come to start the most brilliantly conceived campaign in history. First, thousands of British and American fighters and bombers began a sustained attack on German installations along the invasion coast. German trains, airfields, and planes were strafed in lightning low-level attacks. Road junctions were dissolved into dust and flame. Then came June 6, 1944, a day which marks a step forward in the progress of mankind. British and American warships tossed thousands of tons of high explosives on enemy beach defenses and strong points. Then, in the early dawn, the power amassed by years of Allied energy and sacrifice met the best the Germans were able to offer. Onto the beaches of France poured the fighting men of Great Britain and America, and on the beaches many died. After 24 hours of desperate fighting, the first phase was over. The landings had been made and were being held.